Well, a very good morning, afternoon, evening, depending where in the world you are dialing in from. My name is Adrian Reed, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar. I'm really pleased to say that today we are joined by Almarie Meyer, who's going to be talking about what I think is a really pertinent topic in many business environments, but probably particularly so for us as BAs. The session is entitled Assertiveness and the Power of No. I suspect many of us as BAs have that experience where we say yes a lot. There are opportunities that we say yes to, but also project commitments and many other things beside. So I'm really looking forward to hearing Almarie's perspective on this. I saw her speak at the BA Conference Europe earlier this year, and it was a really fantastic session. So before we start, a little bit about Almarie. Almarie started working in the 1980s in South Africa and has held a range of technical specialist account management and senior leadership positions. She's currently based in Perth, Australia, where she now runs her own business, teaching others to be effective leaders through improving their communication and presentation skills. Almarie describes herself as a recovering yes-aholic. I love that word, yes-aholic, who has made all of the communication mistakes in the book and uses this experience to help others avoid making the same mistakes. So with a presentation entitled Assertiveness and the Power of No, before we welcome Almarie, one thing I should say is we're aiming for this to be interactive, so please do ask questions as you go along. So with a session entitled Assertiveness and the Power of No, please welcome Almarie Meyer. Almarie, over to you.
Thank you, Adrian, and welcome to everyone. The first slide we're going to look at is just to make sure that this session will be valuable to all the attendees. The topics is mostly going to focus on business relationships, but communication is a skill that's relevant to all your relationships, personal and business, wherever you meet with any other people. If you're here to look at an interest in your communication skills, if you want to increase your awareness of other means of communicating, if you're here to learn how to build relationships with stakeholders, how to self-improve, and to get a couple of practical tips, then you're at the right webinar. The topics we're going to have a quick look at, we're going to spend about 10 minutes on each topic. So be aware it's a very brief overview. You won't get in-depth detail, but you will get some takeaways that I hope will help you. And if you hang on to the end of the webinar, I will also tell you how to get hold of a free ebook. So the topics we're looking at is identifying the 5 different communication styles, how to recognize these behaviors in yourself and in others. We'll have a little look at listening skills, and then how do you actually act in an assertive way to be able to say no to things you don't want to say yes to. Communication skills, of course, are probably the most important skill you can learn. It's something most of us never ever attend a workshop on. We tend to learn speaking, listening, talking, that sort of skills from our parents, and we learn it from our teachers at school, but we never learn how to communicate. And the whole purpose of communication is about understanding the other person. It's not just telling something or be able to repeat what the other person said. It's about actually the understanding. What happens when we say yes too often is it becomes a health issue. We become tired, there's no time to eat, there's no time to sleep, there's no time to enjoy life. You lose the whole work-life balance, and it becomes extremely stressful where you lie awake 2 o'clock in the morning thinking of all the things you've said yes to and you need to somehow do. The reasons we do that and why we keep saying yes is for things where we don't want to disappoint other people. We don't want to seem selfish. Most people, 99% of all people, actually want to help others. And sometimes we say yes because we have that fear of missing out. What happens if I say, yes, I really want to do that. I want to learn new skills. I want to do new things. I want to do extra projects. But you say yes to so many things that you cannot actually do these things. Quite often we say yes because we have a low self-esteem, or we simply want to be liked or avoid conflict. So we can now go to the next slide, where we can look at the 5 different communication skills. The styles, the first one is aggressive. That is very recognizable. The next, and I've got 5 slides where we'll have descriptions on each of these 5 styles. Assertive is the style we're aiming for, because assertive communication is where both people actually understand each other when they've spoken. Manipulative is a type of aggressiveness. Submissive behavior is when you just do everything everyone tells you. You may grumble on the side, but you're completely submissive. And passive aggressive is a style where you're a little bit devious. So let's look at aggressiveness first. If you look at that slide, you will see there's a lot of descriptions. And I would like you to make a few notes as you go through this webinar. When we look at the behaviors, see if any of these descriptions match people you know, or perhaps even yourself. So aggressive behavior is where you find people saying things like, why can't you ever get things right when you produce a report? Or they'll look at you and say, this report is a piece of rubbish. You'd better fix it before you go home tonight. And they expect you to just do that thing. They'll interrupt you in the middle of things, when your speech, when you're talking. They're quite often loud people. Quite often it will be reactive and impulsive behavior. On the other side, where you don't want to do things and you're saying no in an aggressive manner, it's something like, I won't do that. You can go jump off a cliff, or something that's rude and dismissive. The next behavior I would like to look at is manipulation. Manipulation is where people find your weaknesses and then they use these weaknesses against you. You'll see the descriptions there again. It's not reactive in this case, but it's actually premeditated. People deliberately create this manipulation. They find your soft spots. They find ways where they can benefit themselves at your expense. You see that quite often with children. If you tell a child, no, you can't have that, they'll come back with things like, but I love you. Don't you love me? And at the work environment, it could be things like, I'm only asking you to help me because you're so good at this. And quite often people would then go, yes, okay, I'll help you. I'll do your work for you. So the way to work with manipulative behavior is to show a mirror to them, show them that they are being manipulative. Ask them things like, you've asked me to do this. Does it sound fair to you? Ask them, do I have a say in this matter? And look out for repeat offenders. They may be the manipulators. The next one, passive-aggressive behavior. This is not always as easy to spot as some of the other behaviors. And this is where I used to be very guilty. You're angry at someone, but you feel you can't speak up, so you keep quiet. and you hide this anger, and the anger comes out in ways that's not constructive. You'll find people say things like, fine, whatever, and then they'll go do it, but they do it with a bad attitude. They'll say things like, oh, I thought you knew, when they've hidden something from you. They didn't tell you about a meeting that you then couldn't attend, or they didn't tell you about some requirements a stakeholder had. So if you hear things like, I thought you knew, I was only joking, I don't know why you get upset, it's very likely that person is indulging in passive aggressiveness. You also find backhanded compliments in this category, where people will give you a compliment to say, that was really good, but then they qualify it for a beginner or for someone with your education level. So please be aware, if you're doing things like this, other people may not appreciate it as much as you possibly think they would. Quite often, people with passive aggressiveness will find pleasure in getting other people to lose their cool. They'll keep nagging until the other person gets aggressive. And then they'll blame the other person for being aggressive. Well, the passive aggressiveness actually instigated the behavior. The fourth behavior is submissive behavior. That is where it's 100% all you, nothing me. And because of that, you suppress your feelings, you suppress your needs. Sometimes it's so bad that when people ask you, what do you want? You don't even know what you want anymore, because you're so used to catering to others, to giving them 100%. Every time they ask for something, you just say yes and you do it. And of course, it can cause resentment and bitterness. Sometimes you would even give people things they don't ask for. In many cultures, especially women, are taught from childhood to be submissive, to never say anything, to always stand back, to always give to the other person. You probably have heard of the fight and flight response. Submissive behavior is the flight response. Think of a dog rolling over, baring its throat, saying, just do anything to me you want. That is submissiveness. So all four of these behavior are behaviors that are not conducive to good communication. The fifth behavior is assertiveness, and that is the one we're aiming for. This is the most effective way of communicating, and it's the one that we need when relationships are important to us and where we need to be productive. In a work environment where we need a team that's productive, we need them to have assertive communications. It's open, it's honest, it's respectful, and it has a balance between the two different groups or the multiple different groups. Everybody's needs are considered. And the good news is you're not born with this. It's a skill, you can learn it, you can practice it. So shall we have a quick question? Does anybody have questions there?
No, that's fantastic. And we do have some questions coming in, but do, if you're listening live, please do type in any questions that you have. So the first question that's come in is a really interesting one, and it might be that you're planning to cover this in a few slides, Anne-Marie, but it's the essence of the question is about the difference between assertiveness and arrogance. Is there a difference, or I mean, clearly there is. How do we tread that fine line?
That's actually the next slide. So we may as well go on to the next slide and talk about. Yes. So that is the big secret between assertiveness and aggressiveness. When you look at aggressive behavior, it's all about myself. It's all about my needs, what I want. While assertiveness considers both sides of the equation. And we've said that submissiveness is all about the other person's need. So when you start thinking about, is this behavior aggressive or assertive? Think about where the balance lies. Is there an equal power balance? Are people's needs seen as equal? Is there respect? If there's no respect, if people are putting you down, then it's not assertiveness, it's aggressiveness. When you find something where there's a hidden or else, like when somebody's giving orders, if it's, you will do this task, even if it's not said, there's an or else implied. That's on the aggressive side. So think of the power balance. And when you are the boss, you in the authoritative position, talking to someone, reporting to you, it's very important to make sure that you are not being aggressive towards them. Because so often it's a throwaway comment, oh, just go do that for me. But people see it as an order and they're scared to say no to you. So make sure that they know there's a balance, that they can talk back to you. I hope that's answered the question.
I think that's a really useful, really useful aspect there, Anne-Marie. Great. So we've got more questions coming in. I love the Venn diagram. That's a really nice way of sort of visualizing it. So the next question is probably quite a short question. I think it's really just someone's asking for more examples of passive aggressiveness and the difference between passive aggressive and just plain aggressive.
Okay. So passive aggressive is still, it's all about me. So both aggressive and passive aggressive it's all about my own needs. How do I get my own way? While aggressiveness is doing it in an open and reactive way. People respond in an aggressive manner. They tend to be more loud and obvious about it. Passive aggressiveness is a lot more subtle and a lot more premeditated. Sometimes people get away with not even noticing that it's passive aggressiveness until you rethink about it later, like that backhanded compliment. If they say, oh, you're really pretty for a plump girl, or something like that, people go, was that a joke? Was that a compliment? No, that was passive aggressiveness. If it's not open, honest, above board, respectful, it's very likely passive aggressiveness.
Definitely. And actually, there's a follow-on question to this, and I'd be really interested to get your view on this one, Anne-Marie, because I've got I guess a particular view on this. It's do these communication styles vary by culture, and in particular, is passive aggressiveness more common in some cultures? And I guess being British, I've got a view on that, but I'd be really interested to know your view.
I think so. I find the American and the Arabic countries to be a lot more, the men tend to be a little bit more on the aggressive side. And in many patriarchal societies, I grew up in South Africa in an Afrikaans family, where girls were taught to be good little girls, don't speak up, be quiet, look after your menfolk. So yes, it does vary per culture. The Scandinavian cultures are a lot more equality-based, but it's not all culture. The main thing you need to remember is it respectful? If there's respect on both sides, it's likely to be assertive.
Yes.
There are things like the British culture where people keep saying sorry. Even the buses, when they're not taking new people on, will say, sorry, this bus is not in service.
Yes.
But it's a sorry out of politeness. It's not a sorry out of you better than me. If you understand the difference.
Absolutely. I think that's a really nice a really nice summation. And if anyone is, I mean, a slightly different topic, of course, but international cultures. There are various models out there. There are two that I found useful. One which the name of which I've temporarily forgotten. The other one that's quite classic is the work of Hofstede, Geert Hofstede, who wrote a book called Cultures and Organizations. But there's Hofstede's Cultural Dimensions, which if you Google would reinforce an awful lot about what Anne-Marie has just said there as well. So great. Okay, so our next question.
Yes, and
sorry,
yes, and definitely, if you work with international teams, you definitely need to read up and be aware of the other cultures.
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
So our next question is being considered a nice person, will that mean that you often fall into the submissive category? If so, how can this be avoided so that others don't take advantage of you?
Okay, that is a lot of where assertiveness comes in. You can be nice and say no. I think we'll be covering most of this in the next couple of slides. So perhaps if I haven't answered that question when we get to the end of the session, please remind me again and say I've got a more specific question. But you can be nice and assertive.
Fantastic. And maybe one more question before we move on, and it's about repeat offenders. You mentioned people sort of repeat offenders who have particular, I guess, styles. I think that the essence of this question is how can we, if someone is continually being, say, aggressive or passive aggressive, how can we respond to that? And I'm guessing that you're probably going to come on to cover that.
Yes, I think so. Yes, so let's go on to the next couple of slides, and then I'll make a note here. And if I haven't covered that, then please catch me again. So the first topic that I want to cover on communication is active listening, because listening is where leadership and communication starts. So many people are used to hearing and repeating what they've heard, but they're not listening. And the big skill on active listening is asking the right questions. I will assume that most of you know open and closed questions, but I'm still going to repeat what they are. And I'll use Adrian as an example because he's an easy target. Closed questions is where you ask a question with a yes and no answer. So I could ask something like, do you like working with Adrian? And you would simply go yes or no. An open question in that same vein would be, what was it like working with Adrian? Now you can't answer yes or no. You've got to tell me something. But you could get away with saying, oh, working with Adrian was amazing. And that's not enough information. I need to get you to define what that means. And that's where the clarifying questions come in then. And again, there is where I recommend don't ask why questions, ask what or how questions. So in this case, you can say, what exactly was so amazing about working with Adrian? And then they have to explain, what does amazing mean? So define the problem. Tell me what it really is. The reason why I say stay away from why questions is because it can sound judgmental. If somebody tells you something and you go, why do you say that? People become defensive. And to be able to communicate and get to the real reasons why they're saying it, we need to be assertive, not aggressive. So you ask questions about what and how. You can ask them to explain how this fits into, explain what something really means. And by doing that, you find out their why. And especially in the BA community, quite often you end up with requirements that says what needs to be done, how it needs to be done, nobody's gone deep enough to say the real reason. What is the why? What is behind this project? And we want to find that out without making people feeling defensive or being put upon, or just any of that things that will prevent the relationships from improving. You go into the listening sessions with intent. You've got an agenda. It's not a hidden agenda, but you know what you want to find out. You're not there to do the talking. You're there to do the listening, to ask the right questions and to find out more about the other person. You'll find quite often if in your job you say to other people, nobody ever listens to me, the reason for that could be because you are not listening to the other person. You need to listen first before they will listen to you. They need to feel that they've been heard. Let's see if there's anything else I needed to cover on this one. Are there any questions about active listening specifically?
So there's we haven't got any questions specifically about active listening, but a question popped in specifically when you were mentioning why, actually, Anne-Marie, which is
Yes.
is a question that as BAs we're always trying to get to the bottom of, and the question is, if we're on a project that has, say, no business case, so that the person is saying, for example, it has no business case, or I guess the person hasn't got access to it, can you give any examples of questions we would ask to get to that why without appearing, inappropriate or aggressive?
Yeah. You'll find that even when you do have a business case, it doesn't actually tell you the real reason. It may say things, oh, we need this to be faster, we need this to be more profitable, we need whatever, but it's quite often not the real reasons. So you need to go back to finding the real problem. And you can do that by, when you're speaking to your stakeholders, asking them about how they do their jobs, where they get stuck. Ask them for their own suggestions. Because it may be that the person who wrote up the business case was giving their opinion. And remember, when you've got 3 people in the room, you've got 5 different viewpoints. So you need to try and track down all those different viewpoints that may or may not be in your business case. And by asking questions about how people do the work, what their irritations is, what troubles them, what keeps them awake. So there's a lot of what and how questions you can ask. And once you've got the relationship and you've asked enough what and how questions, you can start repeating things back to them to say, from what I've heard, to me, it looks like this is why so-and-so happens. And then you start discussing the why. But it's not your first questions.
Fantastic.
Does that make sense?
It does. And in fact, we've got a really nice comment coming from someone who just says that the business case is the tip of the iceberg. And
absolutely.
I love that, because you can just imagine there's the stated reason, and then there's all this other stuff. There's power, there's politics, there's relationships, and I love your focus on perspectives. It's so true. So fantastic. So we have no further specific questions at this point, Anne-Marie.
Yes. Okay. So good. Let's move on then. Okay, so being assertive. The first place to start with assertiveness, again, it's not with the other person, it's with yourself. You need to spend a little time with yourself, being introspective and deciding what are your own real values and where do you put the boundaries. We spoke a little bit about those repeat offenders the people who always come round and say, oh, I'm so busy, can you just help me finish up this? And you tend to go, yes, okay, I'll help you. If you know what your boundaries are, if you've set those boundaries, and it feels a little bit premeditated, but if you've decided, to me, what's important is honesty above all else, or truth above all else, then if somebody tells you to lie, tell people I'm not here when they haven't done their work. Or tell people they can't have that when you know they can. That is your value. And if you stick to your values, you won't cross the line. Your boundaries can be things like, I'm prepared to work overtime, I'm prepared to put in 110%, but I'm not prepared to put in 200%. I'm not working overtime more than once a week. I'm not working on a weekend more than twice a year. I'm not working every Easter, every Christmas, every New Year's Day. So think of what your boundaries is. You'll know which people are irritating you at work. You know which people you feel are transgressing your boundaries. So if you spend the time thinking about where you have the issues, what you will be doing, and preparing for that, then it becomes easier. Do we want to have a few questions here, or should I go on to the next part?
No, a question has popped in actually around boundaries. Okay. And specifically the question is, should we communicate our boundaries to others? And the person goes on to give an example. I'll trim it down a little bit, but the example is essentially they've got into a pattern of working long hours, and that's become the new normal. So it's become expected. So I guess the essence they're asking, should they communicate their new boundaries, or should it just be for them as a reference point?
No, it's definitely something to be communicated. If it's a culture thing, you can actually go to whoever you report to and tell them, I've noticed that the culture has become working overtime every week or every day. I know in places like Japan, I've recently seen that they're starting to use drones to go through the office and chasing people out because they work too late.
Wow. So, that's a brilliant idea.
You need to be honest. You need to make it visible. And if your boundaries are, I never get to spend time with my husband or wife and children, or I never get to go to the movies anymore because I'm always working, you need to communicate that, to say, I've noticed, maybe you're the only person in the team, then you can say, I've noticed that I work 10 hours every day, but not everyone is doing that. Can we have a look at my priorities? Can we rearrange some of my work so that I will be able to do it in my normal 8 hours per day? It's definitely not something that should be hidden. And if it's a culture where everybody works overtime every single day, and it's not just short term because we've got the summer sales or we've got the big Christmas rush and we need to complete a project before the end of the month, because anyone can work overtime for a short period. If it's become a regular thing, then you need to bring it to the attention of either HR or your manager.
Definitely. Yeah, otherwise, it does just become the new normal, doesn't it? It becomes the baseline. So
and that's also where you find a lot of disengagement, because people go, I'm so tired now. I'll do all this work, I never get appreciated, and I start looking for jobs elsewhere.
Absolutely. Good. Okay. No, really useful thoughts there. And we have one other question at this point. So do keep the questions coming in. So type any questions that you have. We'll cover as many as we can. But the other one that's popped in at this point is around preparation. And it's just a short statement, which is, should we prepare for assertive conversations? And I guess
absolutely.
probably bouncing off that, a thought that I'd add to that is how, because it's really difficult to know how they're going to play out.
Okay. Well, quite often when you've been saying yes too many times, it's been to the same people for the same type of thing. You know, the person who sends you an email at 5 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, and then Monday morning, 8 o'clock, they go, haven't you done it yet? I asked you on Friday, I asked you last week, or even I asked you yesterday. So you know this is going to happen. What you can do is you can prepare. You can write down your conversation the way you think it's going to play out. And you can practice it aloud to yourself at home, in the mirror, or practice it with a friend. You can brainstorm a little bit if you've got a buddy who wants to help you be more assertive. And you can go, this person every single Friday sends me a big task to do, and they expect me to have it ready by Monday morning for the first meeting. Then you go back and you think, how am I going to tell them? And the way you do assertive statements is by actually giving your emotions. You tell them, when you do this, I feel like that. When you send me an email on a Friday afternoon asking me to work another 3 hours, I feel that nobody appreciates me, or I feel stressed because I can't go home and have time off with my family. So think what you want to say, but say it in a positive way. Don't choose words that says, you always. It's always your fault. Try and start with I statements. Say how I feel and how the behavior, not you are too demanding. You say, when I get this work on my desk on a Friday, I feel. That makes sense?
It does, almost about the impact and the reaction and the what happens, the feelings and the impact of that happening. So highlighting the outcomes. So good.
And if you've been finding it very hard to speak to someone, or if you've got a manager who you feel doesn't take you seriously, it's even more to practice those words. And the more you practice, the easier it gets. Sorry, Adrian?
No, that actually, if we squeeze one more question in, because that really neatly leads into another question, which is, how can you go about being assertive when the boundaries are not being set overtly? And the person goes on to say, for example, my manager doesn't tell me that I must work long hours, but sets the implicit expectation that he expects his team to work long hours because he does himself. And I suspect that's actually a really quite a common pattern, where there's a leader that is sort of leading by example and isn't saying that you have to work long hours, but sort of sets that cultural norm. Tricky one. How would you handle that?
Yes. That, again, you need to be open and honest about that. Go to them. If there's someone you can speak to, tell them, when you work late every evening, or when you work late on Fridays, I feel compelled to also work late. Just be honest. It's all about being open and honest and telling them how their behavior impacts you. When I first became a manager, I didn't realize how much my behavior actually impacted my team. I thought, I'm just carry on the same way I always did before I became a manager, until somebody actually pulled me up and said, do you realize when you do this, we feel we have to do the same thing?
Yeah.
And some people don't notice.
That's really interesting, and in fact, this is clearly a common issue because we've got some comments coming in, and for example, one person says it's a type of peer group pressure that he's
seen,
Which is, and that's an interesting thought, isn't it? That actually, if it isn't addressed, that it proliferates, and then
Yes.
the people who are, it becomes the norm, and then those people will become managers who will proliferate that throughout the organization,
Yeah.
maybe.
Yes. And it's exactly the same with people sending emails after hours on weekends, because then people feel compelled to go check their emails on a Sunday and send replies. So you need to talk to your boss when you do your annual reviews, whenever, when you've got a weekly one-on-one meeting. Just tell them, this is my work phone. I'm switching it off on a Friday, and I will not be answering my phone. I will not be answering emails. It sounds terrible. It sounds scary to say something like that. But practice. Start small. Start with, I'll read my emails, but I won't reply. And then work up to, I'm not even going to open my emails on a weekend.
Yeah, I mean that's a really interesting and that's a topic that could take us into a number of directions, because
Yes.
I'm you know, it is really hard not to. It is almost like it's become a bit of an addiction, hasn't it? Email and communication
Yes.
generally, so or like
Yes.
electronic communication. So fantastic. So
Yeah.
we've got one, actually one. I just want to just feed in one final question here, and the person. Well, in fact, there are two related questions or comments here. One person has said, "Well, will you get promotions then? So if you are assertive and you challenge that culture, is that career limiting?" And another person, I think, quite rightly observes that actually it requires a lot of courage. So I wondered what your take on those two observations are.
If the culture in your workplace is such that by showing that courage to be assertive causes you to not be promoted, then it's a place you don't want to work for, in my opinion. Yeah. But you have to have that courage. Yes, you are possibly scared of not getting the promotion, but having the assertive skills actually shows that you are a leader and that you can be trusted. If you keep saying, yes, I'll do it, yes, I'll do it, yes, I'll do it, you're a follower, you're a doer, you're not a leader. So if you want that promotion, you need to be seen as a leader. And to be seen as a leader, you need to have the proper communication skills.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, an observation just from personal experience I'd add to that is when I got caught in a loop of saying yes to everything and working extremely long hours for a too long a period, it actually just, well, one, it created a key person dependency. So ironically, I was in a position where I probably couldn't be promoted.
Absolutely.
And secondly, I was so burnt out that I was working long hours, but really I was doing a standard day's work spread over a much longer period because I wasn't doing it very effectively. No, that's just me, you know, but
no,
but I wonder whether that's a common pattern, you know.
It's very common.
Yeah.
You get to the point where, as you said, you are so important because you're doing 3 people's work in the team that there's no way they're going to promote you out of that position. They may give you a little raise in your salary, but you're not going to get to the next level.
Yeah, yeah, fantastic. This is brilliant.
It's counterintuitive.
Yeah. This has really resonated. A lot of people are saying that is true, and they agree. So fantastic. I think we should probably move on, Anne-Marie, if that works.
Yes. Otherwise, we get stuck.
But do keep the questions, comments coming in.
Okay, then quickly the tactics of, we've actually spoken about most of these, but when to be assertive and to get to the point where you can say no in the right way, we've said be honest, be direct, and don't apologize for your decisions. Don't walk into a place and say, I think maybe, and have that wishy-washy language. Own your decisions. Tell people, I've noticed that I'm working too much overtime. I'm prepared to do 2 hours a week, but no more. And own it. Don't let them talk you out of it. The alternatives I mentioned there is when people ask you to do a project and you really have too many high priority things you have to work on, then the alternatives can be, there's another person who's even better than I am at this, or it could be, can I drop this task and do the new task you want me to do? So you describe your current work so people know how busy you are and what you're working on, and that helps you to then decide what you really need to work on. If you just said yes, all that happens, you've now got 11 things to do instead of 10. If you said no, you would you stay with what you've got to do, but that could also then affect your relationships. So you don't directly just want to go, no, I won't. You want to say it in such a way that people will understand why you can't do it. And that's why I've noted there that you can replace the word no with a word such as, I would love to do it, I'd like to do it, but I have these 5 other tasks, or I don't have time now, or I really need to finish this project. Can you come back to me on the end of the week and ask me again? So you find ways to postpone it without directly saying no. You can also say, I'd like to do it, but at the moment I've got this and this. So you replace that word no, that may sound too harsh for many people to start off with then I'd like to, but. But is a word that cancels what comes before it. It's one of those things when you do improv, you do yes and, it adds to. If you say yes but, it takes away. So instead of saying no, say yes but. And then of course you keep that balance, you keep the respect. You always do it in a nice way. I think, yeah.
So we
and
have
yeah.
Oh, sorry, I was going to say we just had a few comments come in which are really that will suggest what you're saying is really resonating there, particularly about the be courteous. Someone says that their mother always said to them, "It's not what you say, it's the way you say it," and there can be a big difference. And I think that's probably a true throughout life, isn't it?
It's actually both. It's what you say and how you say it.
Yes, indeed.
So
Content and delivery.
Yes, yes.
And related to tactics, but also the last topic. Somebody says that actually sometimes it's just a reminder of all this that's what's needed. She says actually someone once told her that working long hours isn't necessarily the sign of a hard worker. It can be a sign of weakness because it means you can't plan.
Yes.
Which is another interesting aspect on all of this as well.
Yeah.
And just a further comment, somebody is just agreeing with the earlier comment on particular national cultures communicating differently, and she's contrasting the American communication style, which can be quite stark and direct compared with a British communication style. And I know certainly as a Brit myself, I would recognise that we are really indirect.
Yes.
Whereas when I work with US colleagues, there's a different directness, but that isn't,
Yes.
it isn't better or worse, it just is.
No. Yes, as long as you watch out for the respect.
Yes.
If you find that there's respect on both sides, then you're in a happy place.
Yes. Okay, so shall we move on to the next slide, Anne-Marie?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, I should have said no. So, of course, the steps when you want to say no is you need to make that decision. I like to compare this to driving a car. So when you decide, I'm going to drive a car, you start by making the decision you're going to drive the car, but you have to prepare, you have to practice. You've got to learn from your mistakes. And saying no is very much a skill that you need to learn. If you've been one of these persons that keeps saying yes, keeps getting overloaded. You're so tired and so burnt out, you can't even think anymore. That's where you need to make that decision to say, from now on, I'm going to say no. And you start with small things. You say no to maybe getting your boss a cup of coffee in the morning, maybe asking you to do extra things that's not part of your role. And you can say, just that one day, just that one time, no, not now. No, I'm busy with this. I can do it in half an hour. Try that. But again, prepare what you're going to say so that you will be saying it in a respectful way, and you practice the statements. And like any skill, when we first start learning a new skill, we make mistakes. So don't expect to be perfect. I've been practicing communication for 50 years plus. I still make mistakes. It's not, you can't be perfect. You make mistakes. But if it was something you need to apologize for, apologize and try again next time. The 2 steps I've noted there at the bottom, broken record is where you keep repeating the no statement. If they say, can you work this Saturday? And you've said, no, I promised my son I'm going to his concert. Keep saying, no, I cannot work this Saturday. No, I cannot work this Saturday. No, I can possibly work next Saturday, but not this Saturday. Keep repeating it. Be the broken record. But also beware, it's not a default for saying no. Don't just go every time somebody asks you something, say no, because that can go into the aggressive side of things. If you just keep saying no, 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 without considering the other person's need. It may be that they've got something really important. Maybe somebody's died in their family. So first find out why they need you to do the task they're asking. And if they've got a more important reason than yours, try and help them, or try and find someone else who can help them. The statement about fogging is when you repeat with part of what they say. Say again, they've asked you to work this Saturday. You can repeat the statement to say, yes, I agree, it is important that this task is done and that it is done by Monday morning. But do you really need to have it done this Saturday? Can I do it Monday morning first thing? So you agree with some of what they say. If they ask you to do their work for them, agree that, yes, it's important work. Yes, I can do it better than you can, if that's what they're saying. But don't just take it on. Just don't allow them to make you say yes. Agree with part of it, and then repeat their statement back to them to say, is this what you want from me? Can you understand why I would say no? Okay, and we're running short of time, so I think let's see if there's some final questions.
Yeah, we do. We have a comment. One person says of the conversation we were having about directness, they say whether someone is because of culture being direct or indirect, it's always important to make sure there is respect. And they've just commented that that's a big takeaway for them. So that has really resonated, I think. We have a question which I think is probably from someone who manages others. And they ask, how do you deal with someone who has agreed to do something for you, but then repeatedly tells you how difficult and time consuming it is?
That is a typical passive-aggressive behavior. So what you need to do is have that one-on-one conversation where you ask them to explain exactly what it is that is so difficult. Because if you may find out that the difficult part is perhaps not writing the report, but getting the pretty graphics around it. And there's a skill gap. And if it's a skill gap, you can find a course to send them on. If it's an appreciation gap, maybe they just want to be told how much of a good job they're doing. Are you saying, good job, well done, I really love the way you wrote this paragraph, how you use these descriptive words, how you use the colors in this graph. So appreciate people a little bit more. So again, it's having that conversation. Use your active listening skills and find out what the real reason is. Sometimes people complain because they just like complaining. But you need to then make them aware that complaining is not a good behavior. Complaining is actually an aggressive behavior because it reduces the team morale, it reduces productivity. If they don't have a real reason for complaining, they shouldn't. If they have a real reason, you as manager has the duty to sort it out.
Absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And we do have we have a few more questions, but time is against us. So I guess a question that many people may have is how can people connect with you and stay in touch with you, Almarie?
Okay. Right at the beginning of the webinar, we gave my email address where you can contact me. And I've also given my LinkedIn sign on here, but there aren't too many Almarie Meyers in the world, so you can find me. And then if you've got any questions, I'll be happy to answer. I'll be happy to write up a little, I do some LinkedIn articles as well. So link with me, follow me, and read some of the articles, ask some questions, add some comments.
Absolutely, and I've ever since I saw Almarie present at the conference back in September, I've been following on LinkedIn and the articles. So I'd highly recommend, if you found this session useful, you'll really like the content, that content as well. So well, fantastic. Well, the only thing left to say before we close is really thank you to Almarie for presenting such an insightful and for sharing so freely so much really useful tips, content, and ideas. So thank you very much for joining and presenting, and thank you to everyone who has taken part. I think this is probably the webinar with the most questions, which is, I'm sure, because of presenter and topic, but also thank you for really throwing yourself in and keeping those questions coming. As a reminder, this is part of a series of webinars, and really what we're aiming to do is just create conversations in the BA community about stuff that isn't always talked about. So we're deliberately choosing topics that are perhaps more on the people interpersonal orientated side, and also some other techniques that might not be as commonly talked about. So we hope that that's working, and you'll continuing these conversations after the webinar too. Our next webinar is on the 16th of January. We're joined by Neil Malarkey, who is an actor, an improv comedian, a speaker, and author of a recent book, 7 Steps to Improve Your People Skills. I recently found out he was also in 2 Austin Powers films. So how we managed to get him to speak on the webinar, I'm not sure, but it's going to be equally fantastic. So when you'll get an email shortly after the webinar finishes. There'll be a survey on there. If you could complete that, would be much appreciated, and you'll have a link to sign up for the next webinar as well. So thanks again to Almarie. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and a very good evening, afternoon, or morning.
Good evening to everyone, yes, and thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.